So after receiving her call to ministry, Amanda Sue sold her tech company to pursue Unity's ministerial program full-time. She is set to be ordained as a Unity minister in June of 2025, and I'll be standing there beside her. And she currently serves as a spiritual leader for Unity of Verde Valley in Cottonwood, Arizona. Amanda Sue is committed to empowering individuals to transform their lives from the inside out through spiritual practices with a particular passion for mental health. And Amanda Sue, I am so grateful that you joined us today. So please go ahead.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me. So, a couple weeks ago, my husband and I were on this trip that we do every year called the Fall Colors Tour. Fall colors because I live in Phoenix, Arizona. So, I live in the middle of the desert. And while we do have seasons here, we have the hot, really hot and dry summer. We also have monsoon season where we get these wild dust storms and these really cool thunderstorms. And right now it's winter where it gets down to, a brisk 20 Celsius or so. So we do have seasons, but we don't quite get those beautiful fall colors like those of you in the higher latitudes and higher elevations do. So every year we take this trip called the Fall Colors Tour with about a dozen of our friends. It's 2 days, one night, and we all ride motorcycles up back roads to a place in northern Arizona called Flagstaff, where there are all of these beautiful aspen trees. And that way we get an opportunity to see all of the beautiful hues of yellow and orange as fall comes in and all of the leaves start changing colors. Then we spend the night up there, then we take the back roads back down to Phoenix. So it's a really nice way to welcome in the fall every year. Now, I know a lot of people have a lot of feelings about motorcycles, but I will say that for me, riding a motorcycle is a spiritual experience. You see, when you first learn to ride, there's a whole lot of thought that has to go into it. You really have to pay attention to a whole lot of different things. You've got to know how to sit and to twist here and to squeeze here. There's a lot of timing involved about when to lean and when to brake and how much to brake. There's a whole lot that you have to think about. But then after hours and days and weeks and months of practice, there's this moment when you get on the motorcycle and ride, and it's like you're not the only one riding that motorcycle. It feels like you're part of something bigger, that there's this other energy, this other presence that's just right there riding with you. This presence that just comes up and supports you and nourishes you. I felt the same feeling in creative work in my life, whether it's playing an instrument or writing, where it feels like it's not just my hands doing the writing, not just my words coming through me. I've also felt this support and nourishment of divine love in times of grief, where I really feel that I am not alone. So this year on the trip, I started thinking about this and I started wondering, how can I create more of these types of experiences in my life? These experiences and these moments where I am so viscerally aware of the presence of spirit. And the answer that I came up with is it's all about surrender. You see, when you ride a motorcycle, it's a certain level of surrender. Yes, there's a lot of training and a lot of work and effort that goes into it, but when you actually get on and get out on the road, you are surrendered to the hours of practice that you've put in, to your own muscle memory, to your own reflexes, to your own wisdom, to the guidance of spirit to make the right choices at the right time that can make so much of a difference. And riding on the back of a motorcycle, now that's a whole other level of surrender. So today we're talking about the art of surrender and how surrender can help us create more experiences in our life where we are intimately aware of the presence of spirit working through us and supporting us. New Thought author Elizabeth Townsend, she says in her book, The Life Power and How to Use It, she has this lovely analogy that I just really enjoy about how God works through us. And she compares it to how we pour our will into our hands. So she says, imagine all your life that you have sewed. That's what your hands know how to do. They know how to sew. And then one day you decide, I want to learn to play the piano. And so you sit down at the piano to run the scales, but this sort of thing is entirely new to your fingers. It's like every little muscle is stiff, every little nerve and every little finger protests. I don't know how to do this. I can't run scales. I sew. I can't do it. So there. And you may say to yourself in this moment, gosh, my fingers are so stiff. How rebellious they are. They don't mind me at all. Elizabeth Townsend says, but you keep on sending your want, your will into those fingers, practicing and practicing. And by, you find your fingers have learned the new trick, and you can do it without special thought and will from you. Just as our hands and our fingers are part of us, so are we part of a greater whole. Miss Townsend says that universal purpose and desire play through us. That just as we send our will into our fingers and our hands to try to get them to do what we are hoping they will do for some higher purpose that they don't have the brains to understand, we also cannot see the greater purpose that is trying to live and manifest through us. Have you ever felt called or nudged? One of my friends calls it a God nudge. When something comes along and it just catches your attention in a really meaningful way, and it just feels important in a way you can't describe, and you just feel like you're being almost pulled towards whatever this new thing is. Maybe all your life you've been a teacher and you pursued teaching because there was this inner drive that you had, this inner passion to be a teacher. And so you did it. But then maybe after 10 or 20 years, you realize that your passion and your zeal for teaching just wasn't there anymore. And in its place, you find this new desire, this idea that you want to teach something completely different, or that you want to start writing, or that you want to go back to school. Co-founder of Unity, Charles Fillmore, says that desire is the onward impulse of the ever-evolving soul. That our wants, our desires that dwell within us, those inner nudges that feel so important, that we know is something outside of us calling us and tugging us to something. That is the universal I want, putting itself in our own individual I want, a way to guide and to lead us. So what do we do? What do we do when we feel that God nudge, when we feel that calling to something different or something new? Well, one option is we can resist it. That's an option. We can say, you know what, I see that. I see me being called to that, but I'm just going to keep on doing what I'm doing. Elizabeth Townsend says, in that case, the universal purpose is just going to keep on keeping on impelling us into the new direction. She even makes this joke that made me laugh the first time I read it. She said that imagine God is calling you to paint and you keep resisting it. Oh, I don't know how to paint. I don't have the money to do that. It's not practical. You make up all these excuses and you decide not to paint. Elizabeth Townsend says, oh, no matter. God will keep calling you to paint. And if you still don't do it, God will just call your children to paint instead. Spirit will find a way. So that's one option. We can resist that call or that nudge. A second option is we can go with it for now and see what happens. We take cautious steps in the direction of our calling, but at all times, we are prepared to immediately shift course and go back to the way things were if things aren't working out the way that we want or that we expect. That's an option also. But the third option, the way that we can respond to these callings, these inner wants and desires, is to go all in and surrender. You see, surrendering to that nudge and that calling from spirit allows spirit to express through us more fully. You see, it's the ego mind that tends to get in the way when we're being called to do something new. The ego mind is the one that says, oh, nope, it's too late for me. I don't know how to do that. I can't do it. I'm too old. I'm too young. I don't have the right education. I don't have enough money to do that. It's not practical. What will people think? The ego mind is the one that makes up all these excuses to block us from our good, to block us from the path that spirit is calling us to. But if we can surrender fully, we can allow spirit to express through us. In Unity, we have this teaching called the 4 levels of consciousness. And the first level is the consciousness of a victim. Life is happening to me. I'm a victim in all this, and I have no control. That next level that we can shift to by shifting our mindset and changing our consciousness is the level of victor. Instead of life is happening to me, life is happening for me. And it gives a certain level of assurance that we have innate powers and abilities within us, and we have spirit within us to help us be victorious in what we do. But those are only the first 2 levels of consciousness. The third and fourth levels, vessel and verity, is life happens through me and life happens as me. And while I believe we can shift from victim to victor just by changing our mindset, I think the only way we get to vessel and verity is through surrender. Surrender. Why does it have to be surrender, right? Surrender is a topic that we all seem to want to avoid. And there's a couple of reasons why I think that is. Number one, I think we fear a loss of control. That surrendering means I'm not going to be in the driver's seat anymore. Well, I think sooner or later, we all come to the realization that there's actually very little we can control in life, isn't there? And yet we still celebrate the idea of having control, right? If somebody says, I'm taking control of my finances or I'm taking control of my health, we applaud that. Yay, they're taking control. It's a good thing, control, we think. But I think when we celebrate somebody taking control of their health or finances, it's not really that they're controlling anything. It really just means that they're making a conscious choice to be intentional and to pay attention. We're not applauding the control, we're applauding the intention. I think another reason that we rebel against surrender is because we think surrender means waving the white flag and giving up. But surrender is not about giving up. It's about getting your ego mind out of the way so you can express more fully and authentically as your highest self and your Christ light. Surrender is not about giving up, it is about aligning with your higher purpose. I think another reason we don't like surrender is we want things to be kind of predictable in our lives. We tend to try to predict the future, right? Before we say yes to a job or study something in school or say yes to a relationship, we try to predict what it's going to look like down the road. And I think we try to reason out, well, I'm going to have to learn a lot. I'm going to have to give up a lot. I'm going to have to change course with this. all these things that I'm going to have to need to do. I don't know, maybe it's not going to be worth it. And so we just don't pursue it because we can't predict what that outcome's going to be. I think the final reason that we tend to rebel against surrender is because we have this thought of, well, what if what God wants isn't what I want? H. Emily Cady, author of Lessons in Truth, tells us that that which calls to us is God tapping at the door of your consciousness. That the things that are implanted in our hearts that call to us, that catch our attention, that stay there quietly beneath the surface until we're ready to pay attention and say yes, that is spirit working through you and calling you to something even greater than you can even imagine. Unity author Martha Smock says that in surrendering our need for answers, we make room for divine comfort. We find that we are not alone, but cradled in a love greater than words. That by surrendering the ego mind's need to know the answers, to be in control, to predict the outcome, to only have what it wants and never give up, we realize that spirit is right there, supporting and comforting and cradling us in love. So, how do we surrender? What does that look like? When we're feeling that nudge or call, what do we do? First, we have to lean in. Lean into what you're being nudged and called to. Take that next step. When I first received my call to ministry, in all practical terms, I was not making great decisions, right? I quit my corporate job. Household income was largely affected, and I went back to school to a career that paid a lot less than what I was doing before. In practical terms, it seemed a little wild. And I had no idea when I said yes to that calling. I had this vision of maybe what my future ministry would look like. I never would have predicted that I would be absolutely loving being in a brick and mortar church in a small little town in Arizona and how fulfilling that would be for me and how called to it I would feel. One of my favorite quotes from Martin Luther King Jr. is, "You don't have to see the whole staircase. Just take the first step in faith." When you feel that call, when you feel that nudge, you don't have to figure out what the end game is, what the end plan is. That's for spirit to know. What's for you to do is to take that next step in faith and trust spirit within to guide each and every subsequent step. Unity minister Mary Kupferl says that trusting the spirit within frees you from burdens and releases you from feelings of excessive responsibility. To trust spirit within enhances the working of your intellectual processes and helps you perceive when the suggestions of others are wise and right for you. To trust the spirit within brings inner freedom from heaviness of thought and emotion and lifts you above the strain of difficult striving. By surrendering into that calling, taking each step one at a time, not being attached to what's going to happen, but following and trusting your inner guidance, we can experience freedom. We can experience an ease and a grace with which we go about our work where there's no particular striving or fighting or overworking or over trying too hard, that somehow everything that we need just shows up for us. That's the power of surrendering. And we can invoke our 12 powers in this process of surrender. The power of faith, most obviously, to trust the spirit within and walk that path. But I also think the power of will has a lot to do with surrender. Now, you might say that seems a little counterintuitive. Surrender, but will aren't those opposite things. But Charles Fillmore says that it is our power of will that activates all of the other 12 powers, because it is our power of will that we use to say yes. That instead of choosing to ignore that nudge, instead of choosing to just timidly step in that direction, but be ready to change course the second things don't go the way we want, our power of will is how we align our will and our steps with that divine will. Surrendering into the flow of spirit and knowing that each and every decision will be perfectly and rightly guided. So just like riding a motorcycle or sewing or playing piano, we can find moments in our life where we feel spirit rush up and meet us. We're no longer having to strive and push too hard to accomplish what we need. We're not doing it all on our own any longer, but we are supported and nurtured and nourished by spirit, doing what is ours to do without any special effort or thought to do it. To be effortlessly in the flow of spirit, doing what is ours to do. That is the art and the power of surrender. So I want to take a moment now to invite you to settle in. Settle into your chair, settle into your space, knowing that spirit had a message for you today, and that what is yours to do is to just relax into this moment and let it settle into your mind, into your heart, into your body. So if you feel comfortable, you can close your eyes. And begin to take a few conscious breaths in and out. Shifting your attention inward and noticing that flow of your breath. Not trying to control it, not judging it for being shallow or fast or slow, just noticing what your breath naturally does without any special thought or effort from you. Notice how just the simple everyday experience of your breath has this flow to it. As it flows into your body, expanding and nourishing your lungs and your entire being with oxygen. As your body contracts slightly as you breathe out. This natural, effortless flow. This is the effortless flow of the divine flowing through you. Just as your breath comes and goes without any special thought or effort from you. So too does surrender allow you to be that instrument for a higher purpose. surrendering into the will of the divine, allowing your words and your actions to be guided by that one presence and one power. By surrendering the ego mind's desire for control, predictability, and allowing spirit to flow through us. I can be, I am in the flow of source. I am an instrument for good. My each and every step is guided. I am part of a greater whole. I invite you to choose whichever I am statement resonates the most with you in this moment. And repeat it silently in your mind as an anchor, a mantra, a reminder as we rest in this now moment. Thank you, Spirit.